Welcome to California Times. I am Guy Meyer, and I am happy to welcome my friend William Calhoun with me today. It's been a while since we've been in the studio. Good to see you, William.
Thank you very much, Guy. I'm
Good.
happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me to this table.
Very cool. We are jumping off into territory that's pretty exciting. We're talking about the January 6th events, President Trump and the hearing, and we're going to just explore, examine, see what we've got. We're not exactly average Americans, but we are just people who are interested.
People with questions, and people looking for an understanding as to what is this whole thing about.
Maybe new perspectives, maybe exposed to something different.
Right.
So, all right, we've got some clips we're going to run. We're going to take a look at events, and there may be some stuff a little bit rough coming up here, but if you can hang with us, I think we'll try to compensate and make some stuff understandable, or I don't know.
Or at least worth your time.
We're going to try.
We're going to make it worth their time.
What do you say? Let's run it then.
Let's run the clip.
Achievements will be election security, because nobody until I came along had any idea how corrupt our elections were. And again, most people would stand there at 9 o'clock in the evening and say, I want to thank you very much. And they go off to some other life. But I said, something's wrong here. Something's really wrong. Can't have happened. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Our exciting adventures and boldest endeavors have not yet begun. My fellow Americans, for our movement, for our children, and for our beloved country. And I say this, despite all that's happened, the best is yet to come. So we're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I love Pennsylvania Avenue. And we're going to the Capitol, and we're going to try and give, the Democrats are hopeless. They're never voting for anything. Not even one vote. But we're going to try and give our Republicans, the weak ones, because the strong ones don't need any of our help. We're going to try and give them the kind of pride and boldness that they need to take back our country. So let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I want to thank you all. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you all for being here. This is incredible. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's the Trump sign-off there, the YMCA.
Heavy beat.
What are your impressions just of this little segment? You want to say something that comes to mind?
Oh, yeah, I can respond to that one really quickly, God. When I heard it the first time, and now hearing it again, probably for the 20th time, upon reflection, I have to admit, I do not recognize this as the kind of thing that a man who took the oath of office would say. The oath of office says, I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. However, it does reflect the kind of individual who has been twice impeached. You know, once impeached in December 2019 for obstruction of Congress, election interference, and a second time in January 2021, incitement of insurrection. Okay. And that's what I'm hearing here.
Okay.
I'm hearing not a president, but one who is inciting insurrection.
Okay. For young people at home and anybody else, old people too, the impeachment thing was always sort of a curious element going back to Clinton's days. When somebody is impeached, the word impeached, it refers to the charges being brought against them in the House and Senate. But apparently it doesn't necessarily mean that they were convicted of and removed from office.
That's correct. Yeah,
okay.
It says the crime was committed in the minds of prosecutors, but
Of the people who brought the charges
who brought
in,
the charges to
Right.
the table. But when the jury got to make the decision was not enough evidence.
Right.
The
So
evidence
it's an
does not
interesting
exist.
term because we use that as if it's a definitive, now you're out. I think Andrew Johnson might have been the only American president who was
To-
actually physically
removed from
told
office,
from both.
right. Yeah.
That's way back.
Before our time.
Right. I think that I think his rhetoric there is vague, and he is playing this vagueness. I mean, he's not saying go down there at this point in time. You know, it's go walk down Pennsylvania Avenue, fight like heck. You know,
Right.
He's giving these messages that are not fully grasped by his messengers who are going, some get it,
Right.
some are just trailing along, nobody quite knows. I want to add, we're going to move on to the next one. I want to add one thing. My dear dad, his theories about dealing with trying to create peace in this world was that you let your, quote, enemies, you get to hear what they have to say.
Right.
So even hearing that clip there, Trump had a way with his audience. He brought people in who believed even, you know, a little bit like him.
Right.
He had an effective, and still does, I suppose,
Right.
an effective message.
I
So-
think it's always been understood that
Yeah.
he has a following.
Yeah.
Always understood
Yeah.
that. There is, and he has played to that group of people who've always felt like they've been pushed to the outside. He himself feels as though he's an outsider. You know, his reference to the strong ones we don't have to worry about. It's the weak ones we need to bring along. You see, always is comparing weak against strong. I mean, after all, you're fired.
I mean, I can't.
Is-
yeah,
is-
he's not. There's very little defensible in terms of the values. But I'm going to just say right now that I belong in the Department of White Trash in
Right.
America. I
Okay.
don't feel that I've been completely marginalized at
Right.
all, but yet the river has risen on the American River.
Right.
The banks have risen.
Banks are rivers. Okay.
And the times have changed. And I do think that people who have a conservative perspective
Right.
are being pushed into a channel where they too have to vote for somebody who they don't necessarily
Right.
would wish they didn't have to vote for. But they feel that the other option is sort of like flip a coin. Who's going to do the worst? Who's going to do the best?
Right. You mean the struggle to vote is always one that's going to be in question. You say, well, I'm part of the white trash. I'm going to have to admit, for me, I'm part of the privilege. Just having the right to vote is part of a privileged class.
America.
Yeah.
That's this country.
So I see this as where I am, you know, and so what group do I represent? Still out. The audience is still trying to figure out where do I fit in the spectrum.
And you know what? I mean, you may represent them. I may represent them.
Right.
We're speaking our own piece, as
Right.
it were, or finding the
Exactly.
words from our heart. Let's move on to the next clip.
Right.
My name is Marcus Childress, and I'm an investigative counsel for the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol.
What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name.
supremacists and
What would you like me to condemn?
white supremacists and right
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
After he made this comment, Enrique Terrio, then chairman of the Proud Boys, said on Parler, "Standing by, sir." During our investigation, we learned that this comment during the presidential debate actually led to an increase in membership from the Proud Boys.
Would you say that Proud Boys numbers increased after the stand back, stand by comment?
Exponentially. I'd say triple probably. With the potential for a lot more eventually.
And did you ever sell any stand back and stand by merchandise?
One of the vendors on my page actually beat me to it, but I wish I would have made a stand back, stand by shirt.
On December 19th, President Trump tweeted about the January 6th rally and told attendees, "Be there, we'll be wild." Many of the witnesses that we interviewed were inspired by the president's call and came to DC for January 6th. But the extremists, they took it a step further. They viewed this tweet as a call to arms. A day later, the Department of Justice describes how the Proud Boys created a chat called the Ministry of Self-Defense Leadership Chat. In this chat, the Proud Boys established a command structure in anticipation of coming back to DC on January 6th. The Department of Justice describes Mr. Tarrio coming into possession of a document called the 1776 Returns, which describes individuals occupying key buildings around the United States Capitol. The Oath Keepers are another group that the committee investigated.
You better get your ass to DC, folks, this Saturday.
Yeah, if you don't, there'll be no more Republic. But we're not going to let that happen. It's not even an if. It's either President Trump is encouraged and bolstered, strengthened to do what he must do, or we wind up in a bloody fight. We all know that. The fight's coming.
The Oath Keepers began planning to block the peaceful transfer of power shortly after the November 3rd election. And according to the Department of Justice, Stuart Rhodes, the Oath Keepers leader, said to his followers that we were not going to get through this without a civil war. In response to the December 19th, 2020 tweet by President Trump, the Oath Keepers focused on January 6th in Washington, D.C. In response to the tweet, one member, the president of the Florida chapter, put on social media, "The president called us to the Capitol. He wants us to make it wild." The goal was for the Oath Keepers to be called to duty so that they could keep the president in power, although President Trump had just lost the election. The committee learned that the Oath Keepers set up quick reaction forces outside of the city in Virginia where they stored arms. The goal of these quick reaction forces was to be on standby just in case President Trump invoked the Insurrection Act.
Did the Oath Keepers ever provide weapons to members?
I'm going to decline to answer that on grounds for due process grounds.
In footage obtained by the committee, we learned that on the night of January 5th, Enrique Tarrio and Stuart Rhodes met in a parking garage in Washington, D.C.
There's mutual respect there. I think we're fighting the same fight, and I think that's what's important.
If what we're trying to understand, you and I, is to, and I know for sure, I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this kind of activity. And prior to us even sitting down today, we started talking about what kind of documentation is out there to help us wrap our minds around what we might call Capitol riot or an insurrection. The first thing we did was we pulled together this document that Brookings Institute did, saying, okay, here's an outline of what these January 6th hearings are going to be.
Yeah, you provided that for me.
Yeah, and if we go to page 3 of that document, let me just get there. It says, we believe that the currently available record supports the proposition that Trump and Eastman, along with others, did know that Trump lost. Based on the record, it is also our opinion that they knew within weeks of the election that there was no legitimate pathway to challenge his loss. In particular, we believe the facts support following relevant opinions and conclusions. Trump attempted to retain power by any means necessary. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at an attempt to hold on to power. I mean, I assume we can't change that. I mean, it seems to me it's been outlined for us.
It was outlined. It's been said. The elements of his belief that he, started talking about well before the, even before the before the debates about election fraud was going on. There were issues that anybody looking through the internet to see if there's anything that he's talking about, there are elements that say, oh, well, there were questions even, I think even on people on the left would say questions about is the, the computer voting, what level, what are the flaws? Are there dangers? I mean, this was not, it wasn't just everybody on the left said it was no problem. Everybody on the right said, oh, this is terrible. It was like maybe whoever's going to be it was up for grabs in terms of a debating point. It's an interesting point to me when the media determined that stuff wasn't alleged, but his claims were fraudulent. And I feel like it was really early in his statements that the media affirmed that it was fraudulent claims. And I thought that there was a push where that they could have used, at some point, the court had to prove those claims to be fraudulent because they were just claims.
Right.
I mean, to say you've been convicted, it was an element there. Beyond that, I feel that this is a, lays the groundwork. He plays very loose with these characters who believe that violence is maybe a way of going forward.
Right. Well,
on the right.
He's proposing it.
Huh?
He's proposing violence as a way to resolve.
Could be seen that way.
Right.
Could be seen as a threat. That's stand by.
Right.
What were the Proud Boys going to do? Mm-hmm. We don't know. But he was not telling them to behave like good citizens, basically, or to not to go for violence.
Right.
All right. Let's go on for the next clip. We have coming up a view of some of the violent imagery. Not horrific, but anyways, let's run the camera and see what we got here.
And it's a short clip.
This gives the time frame.
Right.
We're breaking through the first.
Right. See.
We need backup.
Right.
Madam Speaker, the Vice President, and the United States Senate.
Simultaneously.
Right. Exactly. Here they are still trying to carry on business. And
If you want to give lawyer warnings, pretend get out right of jail. We're going to give lawyer warnings. We're going to try and get compliance, but this is now effectively a riot.
49 hours, declaring it a riot.
55 to 55, the Capitol Police One advisor trying to breach and get to the Capitol.
It's a second line.
Right.
Note the very few officers.
Right.
Very few officers. There might have been 20 at that breach right there. Maybe 5 at the other one.
size of crowd is what I'm trying to pay attention to here.
We're about 5 mics out. We're trying to make our way through all this.
All right, 206.
Yeah. And how long is this?
Just another up the steps.
Yeah.
Security is very weak. It's obvious.
Right.
There's not a.
There we go. It's like nobody's paying attention.
Okay.
So the difficulty here, watching this kind of violence, sort of violates my sensibility of what a well-ordered government should look like.
Well, it's nothing to do with government.
Right. Especially at this point, where the votes have been certified.
Oh, this is just a horrible angry mob that have done horrible things in human history. Angry mobs are insane.
Well, but sometimes, as I've mentioned before, sometimes this kind of violence, these kinds of acts are necessary to preserve some of the basic human freedoms that we all enjoy.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I might I'm not sure about if an angry mob has ever preserved any freedoms for anybody. What's your? Give me some examples of an angry mob.
An angry mob. Well, we can look at any riot that we see. Mass shootings, not an angry mob. That might be just the acts of an individual. But if all of a sudden, I mean, I think the Black Panther Party sort of had a sense of what an angry or unangry mob should look like. One that stands for and represents a broad spectrum of people. And I think this represents a broad spectrum of people. I don't think this is
true. They were
so
motivated.
narrow.
They were motivated, definitely. But I just question why. Well, I just question if, in fact, they're going to bring about anything positive with that, or if an angry mob in general is, if you can find too many examples of it coming out with a positive result. It seems to me like it takes people out of loses their sense of self-control and their own personal responsibility. I'll just read one, I'll do a couple of quotes here.
Right.
This was from a photographer, a video man, whose one of his videos went viral. He was part of the group, not aligned politically with them, but he was following them. And he took some of the most horrible stuff that we're not even going to look at.
Right.
Matt Taibbi asked him, he's in his interview, this fellow has also done work in Ukraine right now. He says, upon reflection, what's your take about what happened there that day? And I think his name is John Farina. A lot of it was psychological. When I was there, I was like, holy shit, these people are hypnotized. They can't break out of it because they're already too involved. The adrenaline is pumping through the event. Even I felt the rush. It's like a drunk night where after you watch the things that you did and you're like, oh, fuck. Why did I do that?
Right.
You saw the energy kind of take over the people. I think he's nailing that. Actually, I won't get into the side trap, but we can.
Oh,
I have
yeah,
some
I think
experience with that too. It's not a good thing for civilization or people trying to do things at all, of my opinion.
Well, I guess the Tea Party, let's use that as a historical event. An angry mob dumping tea into Boston Bay.
Oh, but they were very controlled.
Well,
that's what I've read in history. They dressed up like Indians. They had a plan. They stuck in their night. They dumped it. They all went home.
We know what history writing is like.
Okay.
We know that it is inclusive and exclusive, depending on the point that you want to make.
Yeah, because I don't really know. I wasn't there.
Right. And so unless you, as this gentleman said, I was there and I felt the gravity of that.
All right. I don't think the Boston Tea Party would compare with this event.
Depends on which side of the fence you're standing.
I don't think that would be.
Well, that's fine.
Case.
I understand, but I think that you do have to keep in perspective that sometimes violence is a way to address injustice. And these gentlemen were addressing injustice as best they could.
All right, perhaps. One other thing here. We've got the timeline going. All right, we saw that at 2:06. We saw at 1:49. Here's from Politico, Insurrection Fallout. Capitol riot probe zeroes in on Pentagon delay in sending troops. So there's General Walker says, we already had guardsmen on buses ready to move to the Capitol. This is a general in the D.C. National Guard, wrote in his prepared remarks. 3 hours and 19 minutes while a riot raged at the Capitol. The diverging accounts begin at 1:49 p.m. on January 6, when, according to Walker, which we saw about that time, 1:49, you can know exactly what was going on. Somebody should be panicking. Sund, who was the Capitol Police chief, called him with a desperate request for National Guard assistance. I'll end that there. We can see the other one and then go to go back into this deeper.
We can go back to that, yeah. And I do think we want to see the other clip because we know that post this violence, Another committee report was put out.
Right.
A staff report put out by examining the attack
Right.
and the failures on the part of all agencies involved.
Right, and it
So-
says right on the
Right.
on the title page, a review of the security, planning, and response failures on January 6th.
And so it's important for us
Yeah.
to be aware that people have been watching, people have been documenting,
Right.
trying to understand it. So
Right.
let's go to the next clip
Yeah.
and see what we got.
Yeah, we have Caroline Edwards.
Of civil disturbance events, I know when I'm being turned into a villain, and that's when I turned to my sergeant and I stated the understatement of the century. I said, Sarge, I think we're gonna need a few more people down here. And so after that, you know, I think they started conferring. They went a little silent. They started conferring among each other. I saw the person now identified as Ryan Samsel. He put his arm around Joseph Beggs, and they were talking, and then they started approaching the first barricade. They ripped the first barricade down, and they approached our bike racks. You know, at that time, we started holding on, grabbing the bike racks. You know, there weren't many of us, so I grabbed the middle between two different bike racks. And, you know, I wasn't under any pretense that I could hold it for very long, but I just wanted to, you know, make sure that we could get more people down and get our CDU units time to answer the call. So we started grappling over the bike racks. I felt the bike rack come on top of my head, and I was pushed backwards, and my foot caught the stair behind me, and my chin hit the handrail, and then at that point I had blacked out, but the back of my head clipped the concrete stairs behind me.
All right, so we're looking. Here she is holding two bicycle racks.
Right.
It's like two other officers.
Right. And there she goes. She's down.
It just seems like horrendous. I don't want to, you know, like use a word like. It just guts your guts.
Right.
That humans, that there's anything slightly heroic, or that you know that you would. This is not America. Do you hear them chanting USA?
Once they're pumped up that way, we're no longer.
We're in mob zone.
Right. They're pumped up.
It's mob
There's
zone.
excitement. There's tension. There's resistance.
Yeah.
So we're all pumped up.
And
what I'm not clear on is how does it get this far when even Wikipedia's timeline says we know what's going to happen, because if we go to 2020, January through October, we're watching things go on. I mean, they're saying July 30th, Trump cast skepticism at press briefing. September 29th, presidential debate, Proud Boys stand back and stand up. October 31st, Steve Bannon explains that Trump is just going to call a win for himself no matter what. By the time we're in the November 2020 election day shows up, Trump's still already telling people it's a very sad group of people trying to disenfranchise voters. He's already ramping them up. And by the time we get to January 6th, that we have no security, no way of stopping this kind of violence is absurd.
let's dig into this again. Looked at this a second ago. There was a committee, there is a committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs led by U.S. Senator Gary Peters. They produced this staff report. We don't have a date on the report, but it was just printed off the internet within a week or two ago, so you would think this is the current status of the report about the failures. And what William's seeing and what I'm seeing, seems to boggle the mind. When you look at
course.
when you look at what was that second video we saw,
Right.
which was Mr. Childress documenting this activity,
Right.
you would wonder, okay, if this is there to incriminate, does this put Trump in jail, or does it also turn the mirror on the DOJ and Homeland Security? I mean, how could they? Who's responsible is what I'm thinking for these poor people in the Capitol not to have some backup, not to have.
Right.
So, you wanna read something
Culpability
for that?
is everywhere because Capitol Police, National Guard, we can see there's something going on. But jurisdictional lines within our own organizations saying we're not going to try and stop this in some manner or another, not necessarily arrest people, but at least try to stop the progress of her hitting her head on the concrete because she's protecting the Capitol and protecting an official government proceeding.
So, so the basic point you are making, and I know we're in agreement,
Yeah.
is just in a nutshell, they're not. Where is the backup?
Right. What's the coordination?
Not what's the coordination, but then you've got, this thing is brewing.
Right.
It will be wild.
Right.
You know the fear
you gotta
that's
be
been
there.
being stoked
Right.
in mainstream media about right-wing violence all the time.
Right.
Let's read a few couple of quotes from this the
staff report.
The staff report that was issued, I think, back in March. This is a review of the executive summary.
Right.
Okay.
We can go straight to page 3.
Okay, what do you see on page 3?
On page 3, the members of the Capitol Police Board, who were in charge on January the 6th, did not appear to be fully familiar with the statutory and regulatory requirements for requesting National Guard support. How can you not know what the rules of the game are if you're in the game?
I agree. It's just it. Is there? You want to go?
Yeah, we can go. We can continue to go because.
All right, here's this one. Miscommunication and confusion during response preparations demonstrated by conflicting records.
Which page are you at?
This is page 4 at the top paragraph.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so miscommunication and confusion during response preparations, and who's preparing in the middle of this thing?
Right.
I mean, how can you prepare in the middle? But of course, apparently that's what they had to do.
Right.
Demonstrated by conflicting records about who authorized deployment at what time contributed to the delayed deployment. DCNG began arriving at the Capitol complex at 5:20 p.m. Nearly 3 hours after DOD, Department of Defense, received USCP, Capitol Police's request for assistance. Right. And more than 4 hours after the barriers at the Capitol were breached.
Now, for the record, we should make it very clear that this staff report was being prepared starting February the 21st, 2021. Right. And they had a second meeting on March the 3rd, 2021. Right. And after reviewing these thousands of documents, looking at these multiple departments, it just seems, it boggles the mind that a process was not already in place when we know starting back before the 2021, we're going to have a big party. There is going to be a wilding event at the Capitol.
If there's any reason for some of these organizations to exist, this would have been the reason. Right. If there's any hope that Homeland Security could be maintained by these people who probably take in billions of dollars of our budget, You would think that something would be there.
That they would have an idea.
You want to wrap up? I'll wrap it up. But
Wrap
here's-
them up real quick.
All right,
yeah.
so here's the last quote on this. As part of their investigation, the committees reviewed thousands of documents. The committees also received written statements from more than 50 USCP officers, blah, blah, blah. In addition, numerous people they interviewed. Most entities cooperated with the committee's requests. There were notable exceptions. However, the Department of Justice and DHS have yet to fully comply with the committee's request for information. The Office of the House of Representatives Sergeant-at-Arms did not comply with the committee's information requests, and a USCP Deputy Chief of Police declined to be interviewed by the committee. This is still on their website.
Right.
Apparently it hasn't been brought up to date,
or we haven't seen any new documentation at this point.
Talk about boggling the mind, then it's like a cause for an investigation.
Right. And when they go further to talk about a quick response force, the QRF, there's supposed to be this QRF out there. And that to not have a quick response, basically to have no response at all, makes it even more confusing. Is everybody on the same side? Is everybody on the same side? We have to ask the question. You know?
It's a dangerous business if we really do think that this entity of Homeland Security is there to provide security for the American people, I think. And that they got started, as you and I know, because we've been around for a little while, back after 9/11. And it was supposedly the most important thing to do, to consolidate all the intelligence community so we won't have an intelligence failure like we did in 9/11. That's how they got started.
And if we look at the movements of the Department of Homeland Security, and we look at building the wall and immigration movement, we know pretty much in advance what is happening and what's going to happen. Because we can see it. We have enough eyes in the air, as they like to say. We have eyes in the air following this event. We had eyes in the air following this event, and yet jurisdictional lines seem to come into play and stop or not prevent or present any resistance to the interruption of an official congressional event.
And then the official congressional event of this inquiry, that Mr. Bannon, might go to jail for his contempt.
Right.
But these guys did not comply with it. What are they hiding?
We have no idea. Are they hiding anything is the question they're going to ask.
We are having a good time.
We do want to have this, there is a quote that I think is really relevant at this moment. And it really is: the preservation of peace and the guaranteeing of man's basic freedoms and rights requires courage and eternal vigilance. Courage to speak and act, and if necessary to suffer and die, for truth and justice. Eternal vigilance, that the least transgression of morality shall not be undetected and unremedied. These lessons must be learned anew by each succeeding generation, and that generation is fortunate indeed which learns from other than its own bitter experience. So obviously, we're still having to learn from our bitter experience, as opposed to being able to look back and see other instances of transgressions.
And maybe that's the only way that people really learn. And if we can
We're not the
or
fortunate
cross our
ones.
fingers, because how many people, when you and I began this little inquiry amongst ourselves, and I think it was you who boldly suggested we take a look at January 6th, because we said, let's go ahead
do
and be
something.
bold.
Right.
Let's
do something. Right.
And I don't think, I didn't realize that this was in the background
Right.
of this event.
Right.
And this is, to me, it border. You know, you just have to wonder, like, what was there strategy? Was
Right.
was this, were these poor people, Capitol Police, hung out to dry?
I'm
Because-
concerned when I mentioned this to you. How do you communicate with a crowd like that, and then be able to, with a single word in speech, get them to withdraw?
Oh, that's
I mean,
an interesting
this
point.
is the clip we're going to
No,
go
we
to.
don't have it. I got to disappoint you. I could not find that clip again. But let's bring that clip up, even
Yes.
though can't view it.
Right.
Because what the clip was, what it showed, was footage from in the Capitol,
Right.
of a bunch of our patriots,
Right.
in the heat of
Our
action.
compatriots.
I don't mean to be completely sarcastic,
Right.
But that word has been thrown around a lot in this world, and we all
Right.
have to think about what that means really. But so, anyways, they're sharing their smartphones. What's
Right.
he saying? Right?
Right, exactly.
He says, "Go home."
Right.
You remember
The
that?
president says, "Go home,"
The president says, "Go home."
and they're screaming it to each other.
They're screaming at each other. The president says, "Go home."
How could they even hear it with the
But they're seeing
noise
it too.
and rabble
But they're
going on
seeing
around
it.
it?
But we did see it in that clip.
We did
that they
see
were
it.
telling each other, and it was like, okay,
Okay, and everyone starts to withdraw.
the day's over. And it was his words
Right. The same words.
that just like, oh,
Right.
like the same words that he could have said 3 hours ago, maybe.
3 hours ago. Right.
Like-
Because we're looking
like,
at that
hey,
4-hour
no,
gap.
This wasn't my plan at all. Like,
Right.
stop. He had that option, and I think it's interesting to see just the power of those words for those followers.
Right. And to translate it so clearly.
Yeah.
The president says,
Yeah.
"Go home."
Right.
That's
And it was-
that's a clear translation.
It was an order. He's
Right.
their commander.
Right.
That was the way they felt it.
Interesting.
We've got 2 more clips. Let's just go with it.
Let's go with the next clip.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt.
Right.
We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
You see how others are treated. Wait, what others is he talking about?
Talk about himself, I suppose.
Who was treated poorly? And we already established by January the 6th, the election was over, the votes were in. We were just now going through the official process of counting.
Let's just move forward with the next clip then.
Yeah.
It's the next day.
Next day,
and
right.
Trump's next message.
In a recorded message released this evening, President Trump condemned the violence at the U.S. Capitol yesterday and acknowledged that a new administration will be inaugurated later this month.
I would like to begin by addressing the heinous attack on the United States Capitol. Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. I immediately deployed the National Guard and federal law enforcement to secure
I think I
the
turned it off
building
when I heard this
and
that
expel
day.
the intruders. America is and must always be a nation of law and order. The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay. We have just been through an intense election and emotions are high. But now tempers must be cooled and calm restored. We must get on with the business of America. My campaign vigorously pursued every legal avenue to contest the election results. My only goal was to ensure the integrity of the vote. In so doing, I was fighting to defend American democracy. I continue to strongly believe that we must reform our election laws to verify the identity and eligibility of all voters and to ensure faith and confidence in all future elections. Now Congress has certified the results. A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power. This moment calls for healing and reconciliation. 2020 has been a challenging time for our people. A menacing pandemic has upended the lives of our citizens, isolated millions in their homes, damaged our economy, and claimed countless lives. Defeating this pandemic and rebuilding the greatest economy on earth will require all of us working together. It will require a renewed emphasis on the civic values of patriotism, faith, charity, community, and family. We must revitalize the sacred bonds of love and loyalty that bind us together as one national family. To the citizens of our country,
you could only have said that a few times more during his
earlier in the day,
earlier during his term, his last words.
Yeah.
I know you are disappointed, but I also want you to know that our incredible journey is only just beginning. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
Phew, that is hard to watch. Everything about this stuff is really hard to watch.
Very, very difficult to watch. We're supposed to cringe each and every time that we see these kinds of statements, and especially coming from this individual who first leads a violent attack and then calls it off and then tries to give us a sense of optimism about a future he doesn't even believe in.
I can't speak to that. I do know, as I mentioned in the beginning of the clip, when the whole event transpired, I flinched. I didn't want to look at it. I didn't stay glued to the TV set. I saw some images and I went, I'm leaving. Good God. You know, this is, to me, it wasn't that mob that what did he say? That was doesn't represent the movement.
Yeah.
Not that, of course, they don't.
Right.
But I'm talking to. He threw all those people under the bus. He gave them no instructions whatsoever.
Right.
Go on down there. It's his.
Right. Walk down there. I want to be with you.
And then to you defiled, you're heinous. I felt like you're betraying your loyal, I don't want to say anything, fools like some, everybody's.
His loyal following.
His loyal followers, and now they're, just dump. I would hope that everybody who ever was part of that and had some feeling like this was, quote, a movement, quote, that represented good conservative values, just please, look elsewhere. This is not,
or at least try to find something different.
Not in your interest.
Before we leave this table, which I really want to thank you for inviting me, I just like to leave everybody with my final summation of what went on here. And what I see is demagogues fighting in democracy. A lady by the name of Patricia Roberts Miller actually put out a book called Demagoguery and Democracy. And demagoguery has always existed around a democracy because that's a basic element of our freedoms.
A leader fires people up.
Yeah, but demagoguery is an appeal to people that plays on their emotions and prejudices rather than on their rational side. Demagogues have appeared in democracy since ancient Athens. They exploit the fundamental weakness in democracy, because the ultimate power is held by the people. Demagoguery isn't about what politicians do. It's about how we as citizens argue, reason, and vote. Demagoguery is often the result of poor decisions and errors on the part of leadership. I'd like to close this with a statement from Haile Selassie, 1963. We must look into ourselves, into the depths of our souls. We must become something we have never been, and which we have never been, and for which our education and experience and environment have ill prepared us. We must become bigger than we have been, more courageous, greater in spirit, larger in outlook. We must become members of a new race, overcoming petty prejudice, owing our ultimate allegiance not to nations or individuals, but to our fellow men within the human community. I think that's where we're trying to get to.
That's a powerful ending, and we are. I feel like the world needs people who have faith to go beyond violence.
Right.
As violence is not there may not be a functional way of really triumphing in the end.
Right.
You know, and that's
anyways. Sometimes, I mean, we discussed it, but you're right. Sometimes we do.
Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you,
William.
Guy. I appreciate being here.
It's been a good talk.
Excellent.
I think we've made a lot of good points.
Excellent.
Thank you,
Good.
people. And California Times, we will be at it again, or I will be at it
He'll
again,
be
and
at
I'm going
it
to have
again.
William back here for sure. This has been great. Thank you much.
Good.